The 30 millimeter.
No, I'm going to include everything within the 20 millimeter isobaric contour. Sorry if I misspoke. I meant the blue line there. I want to include everything inside that blue line. I don't want to make it too small because now I'm not including everything inside the blue line. I'm going to pull it out here so I get all of this data here inside the box. And then I would log it. Then I would go down to distal latency, starting at the onset of the UAS relaxation, scroll straight up across. Is that where my CDP is? Well, I don't think it's going to matter much whether I measure it there or whether I measured it. This would be too high. The CDP should definitely be less than 5 centimeters up from the LES, usually closer to 2 or 3 centimeters from the LES. And but does it really matter because the slope is the same all the way down? Less than 4.5 seconds is an abnormal distal latency. And I would log it. There is no peristaltic break, so I would go down right down to IRP. Would start at the UES opening and the proximal edge of the LES, and I would scroll across till the swallow finished. Now this isn't a very, there is no finish to this swallow. So I would include all the LES channels. The minimal size of that box needs to be at least 4 centimeters. Generally, you make it closer to about 10 centimeters long. And then come down and get a nice, quiet gastric baseline. And any relaxation below 15 is normal. This obviously is well above 15. And log it. So that's a sample achalasia. Does that help you to? Is that helpful to you?
It does. Yes, thank you.
I have one more I wanted to show you as we're talking about a little bit unusual swallows. This swallow right here, if I were to measure a peristaltic break on that swallow, there is no peristaltic break. Even though visually there appears to be a break in the 20 millimeter isobaric contour, this 20 millimeter line, this blue tracing around the striated muscle, comes down lower than the blue 20 millimeter isobaric contour line for the smooth muscle. So there's no gap. It's not like the striated muscle stopped here and then the smooth muscle started later on. There's really no break there to measure. Great questions. Any more questions people have come up with?
Wendy?
Yes. Hi, Tom.
We see some, of course, with real huge nutcracker type contractions. I sometimes wonder how far to the right to follow that for the DCI, for example.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because you can make a difference between 8,000 and not 8,000 depending on where you put the box.
Yes, that's true. You should encompass the entire propagation of the swallow. So even if it goes out quite a bit longer, by the way, the measurement boxes that I turned on that were your traditional measurement boxes, don't let that limit the size of your Chicago box. So I'll show you on this study. I didn't have this one ready to go yet, but I can pull this up. There's already a compensation on it. I'll turn on the measurement boxes. ISO contours are already set. I think this particular study has some long contractions. Let's say we were going to measure on this, this is a dry swallow here, but let's say we were going to measure on this particular dry swallow. The DCI would start again at the onset of the UES relaxation under the striated muscle. And Tom's question is, how far out do you go? You go as far as you need to. Now there's another little dry swallow in the way, but if that little dry swallow weren't there, I would come all the way down to here. I don't want to go way out here, especially if there's a lot of cardiac artifact. That can throw things off a little. And I don't want to cut off any part of this peristaltic contraction. I want to go to the peristaltic contraction is completed at the proximal edge of the LES and let go. And the normal range, remember, was 450 to 5,000. 5,000 to 8,000 defines nutcracker, and anything above 8,000 defines a jackhammer esophagus. Same with these swallows here. If I were going to do a DCI here, under the striated muscle section and down across the entire completion of the peristaltic wave, contraction wave. Does that help answer that question, Tom?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We have about 5 more minutes if anybody has any further questions.
Wendy,
or if I can demonstrate anything.
Wendy,
yes.
quick question. I
Sure.
think I have 2 patients, when they swallow, there's like a delayed peristalsis. How do you measure those ones? It's beyond that 20 seconds measurement. Like nothing happens and then 21 seconds later something did go down.
Right. That's a good question. I might be able to show that on the achalasia study. This one has a lot of delayed pressurization. They're not contraction waves, but they're pressurizations. So in this, let's see. Let me see if I can find a good single swallow. Here's one, for example, where the UES opening occurred here. The striated muscle fired here. And there is no pressurization below that, but there's a delayed pressurization out here. This one we would not measure traditionally, nor would we measure that with the Chicago measurements. So follow the same rules that you would use for traditional editing when you're making your Chicago measurements. Thanks, Leanne.
Wendy?
So, Wendy, are you saying then that you would measure on that lighter column?
Not even on this lighter column. I don't see really any pressurization coming off of this striated muscle section at all.
Okay, on some of the achalasia ones, when you have columns that are more prominent than this particular one, yes, like that. How much of that do you, on just a traditional one, how much of that do you measure?
Well, if they were coming off of here, let's say it propagated off of this striated muscle section, I would measure this particular column here traditionally. So flipping back to waveform, you would follow along this line right here and measure that set of bumps right there.
Okay, and that's only those?
Yeah, only those. That's why I use this one as this is your vigorous achalasia sample. This one over here, that's why I use this one, because it had a nice propagation, primary propagation right off of the striated muscle. And I included just out to here, not any extra pressurization areas.
Okay. If you have multiple contractions, not necessarily achalasia, what would you do in that case?
The same would apply. I would follow the primary contraction wave off the striated muscle from the opening of the UES. I would follow that down and measure that. Many times you'll see studies when they have disrupted motility where you'll have weak or no peristalsis at all, and then there's a delay and there's another peristaltic wave that shows up later. And just like the traditional, you follow the same rules. If you measure it traditionally, you would measure it with the Chicago. If you're not going to measure it traditionally, you wouldn't measure with the Chicago classification measurements. Very good. We've got just 1 or 2 more minutes. I want to thank you all for joining us today for our first webinar. We will be getting a taped version of this webinar onto our website, hopefully before the end of the week, and you'll be able to review it at any time. The Neurogastroenterology and Motility Supplement is on our website, as well as a quick start guide that will remind you about how to make these calculations. So you can have that handy as you venture into it. And by all means, if you run into any questions after this seminar, feel free to contact our 800 number